point of view. The way we started the year with, and CES just happened actually in Shanghai recently as well. We really started to be overwhelmed by the technology that we started to see at CES. When we started to see AR, VR, mixed reality, everything is coming close and very, very quickly. Started to also see voice assistants, this idea that anything that can talk to you will start to talk back. The idea that esports is growing exponentially in the US with the rise of esports, Twitter, Twitch, what's happening in that is really quite important. The big conversations that we're starting to see on 5G. What does 5G mean in the contextualization as an exponential technology? And the theme of it was really called Viva Las Transforming World. And this is really the world that we're living in right now. It's this fast-moving, transforming, exponential time. So at CES, it was very interesting because the #1 technology that was voted by CES members, the #1 technology at CES was the Impossible Burger. Now, this is built on neuroscience. It's not just soy or tofu or seitan. It's actually something that's a neuroscientific technology that was voted the most important technology at CES. That's interesting. It's not digital, it's not a device, it's not a wearable, it's not something you can plug into your home, but it was the most important technology there. A couple of weeks later, it really fell into context. And the World Economic Forum commissioned the Oxford Martin School to do a study on meat and whether meat was sustainable in the US. And come to find out that their findings were by 2050 that it will be impossible for planet Earth to actually maintain a meat-based diet. And so what their recommendations were, and they're quite shocking, is that we start to reduce our meat intake as all human beings on planet Earth in the next 10 years to 2 meat-based meals a week. Can you imagine? So that's their recommendation so that planet Earth can actually survive the greenhouse gases, the methane gases, and the forces that meat will provide. So all of a sudden, this became a very pressing issue just after CES. Interestingly enough, just about a month ago, KFC heard the call, and this is a really big, interesting trend in fast food, that they actually launched a Beyond Meat chicken nugget in the US. They did a pilot program in Atlanta. They had a week's worth of Beyond Meat chicken nuggets, and they sold out in one day. So all of a sudden, there's an economic imperative to this idea that was considered a technology, which lends credence to the fact that Merrill Lynch basically said, as the pronouncement at CES, that every company is a tech company now. So this is one of my favorite quotes, and I like to kind of bring this into a lot of the chats that I have. And it's that the future always comes faster than you think and never in the right order. And this is kind of the world that we're living in now, and these idea of exponential times. So I'm going to play this video. I'm going to take it way back, but this is not that way back. This is in the early 90s. Let's take a listen to the Today Show.
I wasn't prepared to translate that as I was doing that little tease.
Oh, that's
that little mark with the A and then the ring around it.
At.
See, that's what I said. Mm-hmm. Katie said she thought it was about.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd never heard it. I'd never heard it said. I'd always seen the mark, but never heard it said. And then it sounded stupid when I said it. Violence at NBC.
I heard around big fight up in the lunchroom the other week.
There it is. Violence at NBC. GE.com. I mean.
Well, Allison should know.
What is internet anyway?
Internet is that
massive computer network.
Mm-hmm. The one that's becoming really big now.
What do you mean that's big? How does one? What do you write to it like mail?
No, a lot of people use it and communicate. I guess they can communicate with NBC writers and producers. Allison, can you explain what internet is?
No, she can't say anything in 10 seconds or less.
This is about 15 years ago.
What does it mean?
It's a giant computer network made up of started from.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell us what this was.
It's like a computer billboard.
It's not an. It's a computer billboard, but it's nationwide, and it's several universities and everything all joined together.
Right.
And others can access it.
Right.
And it's getting bigger and bigger all the time.
It came in really handy during the quake.
So imagine 11 years ago or 15 years ago, we didn't even know what the @ sign was. And then we're having a conversation with Mr. Zhao today on the fearsome amount of data that's being pushed through the Alibaba platform. It's amazing how quickly this has happened. And this is what we refer to as Moore's Law. Moore's law is the idea from the IBM founder that technology will double in computational power and reduce in size every 2 or 3 years. So we're living in this idea of these exponential times. And to put it into perspective, it took us 500 years to put a man on the moon since 1400. And then the last 50 years, you can see that we've had cell phones, hybrid cars, Google existed, Facebook, and then all of a sudden we're in the driverless car and autonomous era. We are living in a very, very rapid pace. And what that means is that when we talk about these ideas of exponential times, there are things which are uncertain. The future is very, very uncertain for us because we think we know what we're going, and we just didn't expect this exponential growth surprise factor. And the things that we're talking about now are contextualizing what to do with data, what to do with these exponential technologies. And frankly, that's why we're here today. We're here to better understand what in the world to do with all this data, and how do we apply it to our businesses and our enterprises. So this is what we call the messy middle. There's a fantastic book by Scott Belsky. I recommend that you guys get it. And he talks a lot about his experience in the startup community in Silicon Valley and what it is to be the messy middle, the mistakes, the tumbles, the pitfalls that you make in the middle of this. And again, that's where we're at right now. And we are in an era of what we consider unprecedented change or exponential times. I don't really think in the fashion industry that we're actually have completely digested the implications of fast fashion. One of the things that's coming out, and this was a decade ago, fast fashion is not new news, but here's what is new news. What happens when we consume at such an alarming rate that fast fashion actually becomes a danger to our global sustainability initiative and our ability to live on planet Earth with all the excess apparel that we now discard? That becomes a problem. So we're still digesting what fast fashion means to us. We're trying to look from a commerce perspective about how the changing paths to purchase, and our best friends and our best consumers are also going to be our competitors. What do we do in an environment like that? What do we do in the US when we talk about the retail apocalypse? That stat that Leafy put up before from 2017 to 2018 and the reduce in traffic in mall traffic in China was really interesting, and it mimics what's happening when we're completely over-indexed by square foot in the US. And in fact, there are twice as many store closures as store openings in the US. But here's what's interesting. Consumer confidence in the US is up. And in fact, since the recession, we see it up at 100% tick in 2018, and looking at consumer insights of the Conference Board just last week, it now says that the index stands at 135, slightly down from 135 in July, and the Present Situation Index, which is business and labor market, increased from 170 to 172. So consumer confidence in the US, even with the trade war and even with what people are talking about as a looming recession, is higher than it's ever been in decades. And it's being driven by the digital experience. What we're not seeing is growth in brick and mortar, but we are seeing growth in what's being powered with technology and consumer experience. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. So this is a great activation that we're really looking at right now, and looking at augmented reality and how that's going to manifest itself in the consumer experience. So this is a fantastic activation where it's Zara, fast fashion, going in with an AR application that you use your camera in a bare open shop window. And in the shop window, you see a runway show and you can purchase from the app. We're also seeing wayfinding in Lowe's department stores where you can follow the line and find your light bulb and find your lamps. And obviously furniture placement with IKEA and is becoming much more commonplace now, building it on the AR experiences. Now, this is probably not new in China, and one of the things that you'll probably see in my presentation will feel quaint in a way, because we do marvel at some of the things that we're seeing here. But this just actually launched only a few weeks ago, and the idea that you'd have an AR experience in Google Apps AR, it was just launched recently. So we're starting to see a lot more AR activations, and what we're realizing is that everything is shoppable now. With a QR code, with wireless Bluetooth, we're seeing that everything is shoppable now, from a bus shelter to your own closet. So we're truly living in exponential times. when we're talking about exponential technology, we're talking about things like solar energy, gene splicing, quantum computing, digital currency, 3D printing. There's dozens of things which are considered exponential, but I'm not going to talk about all those today. I'm going to talk about a few that are really affecting us right now. And the way I refer to exponential technologies is I refer to them as big ideas that allow us unintended opportunities that we didn't imagine before. So when you think about Apollo 11, we got some things we didn't think we really were going to need. We got dust busters, we got solar power, which is fantastic, we got Mylar, and we got Tang. If you guys are familiar with Tang, it's a quick orange drink that was popular in the 70s. So we got some things we didn't really know we wanted, and we got some pretty useful things too. So exponential technologies tend to deliver unintended consequences of things that we can't imagine are going to create new opportunities, new markets, and new businesses. One of the things we got from a footwear perspective is we actually got air. So these are the first poke at air with monofilament tubes called Dynacoil. This is also actually inspired by NASA in the late 60s, early 70s. So one of the exponential technologies that's really important, and we talk about this a lot right now, is what's happening on the cognitive computing, machine learning, and AI side. So there are a lot of people that are in the retail space and in the apparel space that don't really quite understand that cognitive computing and ML and AI is on a continuum. So what we're seeing right now is a huge rise in what's happening in ML, but the AI actually refers to the singularity. And the singularity is when we'll have computers that think and reason in the same way that we reason in the human mind. Now, Singularity University talks about the ability for us to be able to have true AI in about 50 years. And the implications are going to be pretty daunting. But right now, machine learning is very useful. So we're seeing right now, in the US especially, that Google is now answering your mail. And they're doing a pretty good job. They're looking at your tone, your content, the words that you use, and they're suggesting ways that you can answer back. These are quick machine learning things that are starting to touch our everyday lives. We're not thinking about it that much. But Stephen Hawking had some pretty interesting words about this. We'll play this video, I think, if you can do that for me. And he talked about the threats of true artificial intelligence.
The forms of artificial intelligence we already have proved very useful. But I think the development of full artificial intelligence could spell the end of the human race. Once humans develop artificial intelligence, it would take off on its own and redesign itself at an ever-increasing rate. Humans, who are limited by slow biological evolution, couldn't compete and would be superseded.
So the idea that he's putting forward, and Elon Musk has actually said the same thing, is that when AI evolves to be as smart as us, it'll start to evolve to be much smarter than us and start to believe that we are obsolescent. And they will either be able to make us immortal or obsolete. A very, very interesting philosophy, especially as we look at and some of the predictive language around what we're going to start to do with AI. So George Soros talked a lot about this recently at the last Davos, and he said, I want to call attention to the mortal danger facing open societies from the instruments of control that machine learning and artificial intelligence can put in the hands of repressive regimes. What will we do with this awesome power, right? There's a fantastic show in the US called Black Mirror. It's actually a UK show where they talk really seriously about some of the real implications of social engineering, which is these are some of the laws of unintended consequences of exponential technologies. We talked a little bit about 5G in the introduction, and one of the things that we're really trying to get our heads around as an industry is what are the implications of 5G if we're not in the communication industry. So if you talk to rank and file folk, they'll discuss 5G and they'll say, hey, I'm going to get a faster movie. At 5G, it used to take me 26 hours to get Guardians of the Galaxy, and now it's going to take me 3.6 seconds. That's great. But the way it's being planned right now and the way people are talking about it is that 5G, the difference between 4G and 5G will be the difference between black and white TV and color. And there could be a lot of unintended consequences when we get here. The reason that 5G, and China is a leader in 5G, they will launch 5G networks first, is that it's a massive infrastructure undertaking. What they'll have to do is change the millimeter wave structure from long waves to short waves. And those get impeded by things like trees and buildings. So there's going to be a massive small cell network that will have to be put up of networks, repeaters, dishes, and disks that will be able to bounce off of one another. And that's called massive MIMO, massive in, massive out. And what that'll allow is data to flow in two different directions. That's what they refer to as full duplex. The reason it hasn't rolled out in the same way that 3G and 4G is because it's not just a little bit faster, it's exponential. The reason it was starting to be really put forward is because of the problems with mobility. The problems in cities like Shanghai of 25 million people, of getting people to place were really identified by the auto industry, and they realized that they can't sell enough cars to be on enough roads to be able to stay viable in the next 20 years. If you have the model of just selling car, you're out of business. So you have to change your model to mobility. Mobility means moving people around. You have cramped space, and you have to be able to move them around quickly, and that's being driven by self-driving cars and automated vehicles. Now, what's interesting is if you look at the 5G network now, while it started with what we refer to as these low latency applications and the idea of edge computing, it will have implications all around anything that's in the IoT. That will be voice, AR, smart cities, wearable technology, and everything will be affected by 5G in ways that we are just starting to understand now. And in fact, Japan has put forward the idea of building their whole society around these exponential technologies, and they call it Society 5.0. What they're looking at is saying, how can they take everything that we're talking about, all these exponential technologies, right? Big data, IoT, AR, drones, warbots, and how can they change farming? How can they change the healthcare delivery system? How can they change healthcare overall? And so they're actually planning in their way to aggregate all these exponential technologies and change society itself. And one of the things they talk about is what's going to happen in the medical space. So recently I was at Microsoft, and in their Discovery Center, they're actually showing applications of using holographic image to help train doctors. It's fantastic. But in an era of 5G, they won't be training doctors anymore. Doctors will be doing holographic surgery remotely, doing cleft palate surgery in Kenya from an office in Boston, because everything will happen in real time. With the advances of AR and 5G moving data so quickly, everything happens in real time now. So there's a fantastic article by Kevin Kelly, who is the editor of Wired Magazine, and he wrote a cover article called Welcome to the Mirror World, where he started to postulate that on top, with the advent of 5G and AR, on top of the physical layer of everything in our world, there will be a digital layer. Okay? So it's going to look and start to feel a lot more like Blade Runner 2049. So there's also a fantastic futurist. His name is Keiji Matsuda. And there's a fantastic video called Hyperreality, where he imagines this exact mirror world that Kevin Kelly described. Now, if you can start to see that there's a holographic image of everything everywhere you go, then you're constantly being spoken to, marketed to, sold to, and communicated to from a brand perspective, from a commerce perspective, from society's perspective. And so what he basically said is, in his article, that when you have this mirror world, this mirror layer on top of the physical world, it's not just that line where you go in Lowe's department store and find your light bulbs. It's much more than that. It's that on steroids. And all of a sudden, let's say, for instance, you are in your hometown. You go to a restaurant, and on the outside of the building, it says it's an Italian restaurant, it has 4 Yelp stars, it has a fantastic spaghetti carbonara, and you can get an appointment at 8:15. You can walk by and see all that. That sounds great, right? But what happens if it has a 2-star rating? Who owns that terrible rating? The store owner? The property owner? Yelp? So we start to get into some real property issues, right? We start to see that there's going to be some real implications. Right now, you can go and you can put a Pikachu or Pokemon character on the Eiffel Tower. That's great. But what happens when someone decides to put something more nefarious on there? They put a swastika. Who owns the Eiffel Tower? Who owns that property? So we're going to have these whole areas that will open up industries, commerce, and societal problems that we'll have to discuss: property rights, legal jurisdiction, virtual leasing, imminent domain, privacy, public interest, safety, public policy. That's all going to happen with the advent of the mirror world. So when we're talking about exponential technologies, it's not just about faster movies. It's new problems for society to solve and new business opportunities for us to identify as we grow our businesses. And the last exponential technology I want to talk about is data. Obviously, we talked about it a lot today. We're going to talk about it for the next couple of days. And at CES, there's a fantastic panel that's run by Shelley Palmer. And he talked about data in some very provocative ways. And I really like what he said. These were his 5 main points of things that we needed to start to realize. And he said, data is more powerful in the presence of other data. Anything that can be connected will be connected. Anything that can be hacked will be hacked. Anything you talk to will understand you, and it will start to talk back. Access is valuable as ownership, and the on-demand economy is here. This is all driven by data. And we understand this in this room, but not everybody understands how much data is being generated. 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years, and in fact, by 2025, there'll be 163 zettabytes of data created, and 1 zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes. So what do we do with that data? How will it be aggregated? How will it be analyzed? And what will we do with it? So, like for instance, one of the things that we can do is we can have maps that are in real time. The amount of data that would go into real-time mapping of wind, weather is phenomenal. Now we just take this for granted. So what we refer to now in the US, we talk about it being a Gaffa world, right? Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. And what we're seeing is that they're starting to lean in very hard from an M&A perspective on AI, VI, AR, NLP, and IR. And what's interesting is we're just now starting to get to this idea of, if you look on this little map here, there's very few of these companies that are actually looking at image recognition, and yet we can go online on Baidu today, and we can take a picture of something and find 5 places that sell it in 2 minutes. This is very new for us, and yet we're starting to just lean into this now. And in fact, there is a great gap between our understanding of how commerce is being done in China that we're really trying to understand now. So I'm going to play a video for those of you who aren't on the WeChat environment, and you will find it actually really quaint. But this is from a video that the New York Times did called How China is Changing Your Internet. And so it's a great little video. We'll go back. If you can start it up for me, that'd be fantastic.
Hypothetically, imagine you're sitting at home and one day you notice your corgi is dirty. You open WeChat, hit a few buttons, and a few hours later a man shows up at your door with some shampoo and a big vacuum. Your dog gets cleaned and he looks great. You take a photo, you share it with your friends, and tag the dog cleaning business. You haven't left the app. Your friend who likes Hello Kitty and works a boring office job is slacking off at work and looking at WeChat. She sees the photo of your clean corgi. She decides she wants her poodle cleaned. She clicks the tag on your photo and orders the same service. Within seconds, the man with the big vacuum is on his way to her house. She pays him, and he's happy because he got paid instantly on WeChat. She starts chatting with you to thank you. Neither of you have left the app. While chatting, she tells you about a new hip noodle joint. She says, you have to come. It's a schlep, but you accept. She orders food while still at her desk. You order a taxi. She pays for the food. On the way to her house, the man with the big vacuum invests the money he earned from both of you into a wealth management product that's probably a little too risky. Neither of you nor the man with the big vacuum have left the app. Both of you arrive and the app tells the kitchen you're there. Your WeChat profile photo pops up on the wall. It's an old photo from the year you had that weird part in your hair. Of course she makes a comment. Your food is served. You notice your meat is a bit overcooked, so you snap a photo and post a disparaging restaurant review. You're already on your phone and you remember you still owe your friend money because she paid. You transfer her money. Neither of you, the man with the big vacuum, nor the restaurant have left the app. At the restaurant, there are no menus, there are no waiters, there is no cashier. There is only WeChat.
So this for us is amazing. We can't even believe, because we have all these separated apps where you have to go back in between and transact, and we can't understand how this happens and how amazing it is, and you understand how much data is being driven by this experience. So the question is, as brands, what do we do about this? So this is one of my favorite quotes from Peter Drucker, and he basically says, business has two and only two functions, innovation, marketing and innovation. And so the idea is that we have to start to understand what innovation is and what disruption is inside this environment. And there's tremendous amount that's being disruptive in our markets now. So if you're familiar with the Gartner Hype Cycle, there's a lot of information comes through, and what we look at is what we call the technology trigger of what that new innovation is. We go into what we call the peak of inflated expectations, down into the trough of disillusionment, and then hopefully, if the technology or the idea is sound, we'll go into the slope of enlightenment and into what we call the plateau of productivity. So what's interesting right now, and Gartner does a great job at this, is their most recent report on emerging technologies shows us that coming into the slope of enlightenment is connected homes, autonomous driving, mixed reality, smart fabrics, like Google is doing, and augmented reality. So there's good news that these are countervailing technologies that we're going to see more and more of, and those are the ones that we're going to find ourselves leaning into. Now, as brands, there is this idea that we call innovation envy, and I would recommend everyone try to look at Rohit's book. He has a book of 20 non-obvious trends every year. He's a fantastic speaker, but what he talks about is the idea of innovation envy as being a major trend this year. And that's the idea that we're just behind the curve. Us as brands, us as business, everyone else is doing it better than us, and we just can't keep up. And what we have to understand is that innovation is a very tough area. As someone who lives at the beach, what we understand is if we go out and surfing, when you're in a riptide, that's the most dangerous place you can be, but that's where the best waves are. That's where the most reward is. So innovation is can be a very high risk and very high reward enterprise. There's a fantastic woman called Leticia Garza, and she talks about changing the idea of failure into learning model. And because especially as US companies, we're very, very averse to the idea of failure. Nobody wants to fail. Sounds terrible, right? So one of the examples I give on failure is this idea of Google Glass. Now, if everybody's familiar with the story, Google Glass was meant to be an end consumer product to be worn on the street. It was largely ridiculed, tremendous amount of technology when it originated at Google X, but people that were wearing them on the streets were called glass holes. They couldn't understand how terrible it was that people were taking pictures of you. But nobody really understands that Glass X, as an enterprise solution, is wildly successful. The idea to go through a warehouse to pack boxes or to be able to put together a Rolls-Royce aircraft engine using an enterprise pair of goggles is transformational. And 14.5 million US workers will wear smart glasses in the next couple of years. So my question is this: was Google Glass a failure or was it not? That's the idea of this learning model. So I'm not going to play this video because I'm running short on time, but this is a super interesting application of using AR for firemen so that they can go into smoke-filled environments and they can see everything inside a smoke-filled room and they can survive and get people out to safety. So one of the things I talk about is this idea of innovation, and what I'm realizing now is true innovation is the successful translation from predictive, which is what I just did. I just predicted a whole bunch of stuff, these crazy outcomes that could happen to our business, and that could be a little bit scary. But successful innovation is a translation from predictive to prescriptive. So how do we prescribe something back into the enterprise? So I really like what Stephen Hill is talking about when he describes the S-curve of innovation. He's the head of innovation at KPMG, and what he says is that innovation used to be considered something like a pet rock theory. You'd get an idea, and you'd put it in your line to kick your seasonal can down the road. And he says, no, that's not the point. The point is this: you need to look at innovation tied to your business strategy and tied to your business development so that you're doing things which are starting to future-proof the enterprise and de-risk the enterprise. Once you do that, the pet rocks will come. And the idea that innovation is connected to strategy and biz dev is much more compelling. And that's when we start to talk about disruption. So there's a few people, so when we're looking at these really far out areas of innovation, we start to talk about much more future forward ideas around foresight. And when we're talking about foresight, we're looking at possible outcomes and what the weak signals are that say, here's what we want to happen. here's what could happen, here's what's possibly going to happen, and how do we use these ideas to de-risk our enterprise? And I'll give you an example. WGSN just talked recently about the trend of the end of more. The end of more could be not so weak a signal, but talk about the end of mass consumerism and could be the end of fast fashion. Now, if you're going a little bit farther out, you could be looking at a trend like the attention economy. The idea that people only have so much brain to process what's being put into their heads. Now, a possible enterprise solution that we could be brought out to that is what Meg Whitman and Jeffrey Katzenberg are doing with their $1 billion investment in Quibi, which is super high quality Game of Thrones style content in 10-minute bites. Because they're addressing the attention economy and turning that into an opportunity. Something that else could be really disruptive is the idea of my data, my rules. We've been hearing all morning about data, what we do with data, computational data, masses of data, terabytes, zettabytes of data. What would happen in society if people just said, I'm going to opt out? And that's a movement in California. We're addicted to free data. That would be disruptive, right? So there's a few people from Euromonitor here, and Zandy Bremer talks a lot about the three ideas that enterprises need to engage in when they're talking about moving their business forward. And there's three ways you can innovate. Renovation, which is incremental, innovation, which is what we talk about, and disruption. And what she says is basically that leaders and leading brands harness these mega trends to disrupt a market, right? So they're looking at the drivers that can change, the mega trends that are out, and what they could or should change. So here's an example. I gave you the example about meat, okay? So the driver would be you determine what can change. Neuroscience can make protein. Awesome, right? Then you take the mega trend and you say, what do consumers want or what does society want? They want to be able to survive past 2050. And then you can have something really disruptive like Beyond Meat, okay? So the idea around transformative role of data is that we can start to funnel this in to this era of hyper consumer centricity. So I'm going to give a shout out to my friends at Li and Fung. This is Richard Kelly, a friend of mine, and he did a great talk on the future of stuff. And what he basically predicts is that the current push model in supply chain is dying. You have a manufacturing facility that's oversupplying goods, putting goods in warehouses everywhere, anticipating demand in the smartest way possible, going through our normal channels of distribution to try to thrill the end consumer. And what we're finding, and we know this is true, is this is all wrong. This has all been disrupted now. So we're starting to see a pull model emerge from user-generated content. Photos, videos, vlogs, blogs, and all of a sudden, we're being told by end consumers what they have permission to buy. But that's moving, and so we see great examples of that in China with celebrities. So this is Yang Xia on Sino Weibo, and she has 470 million fans that she's converting into consumers. So she's basically giving social permission for people to buy things on the platforms. Now, this is new for us. Now, just in July, on Instagram, H&M and Zara announced that you can buy now on the Instagram app. Totally new for us. Not really that new in China, but really, really new and shocking for us. But this idea that we're getting social permission to buy stuff is starting to be really compelling when we get into this idea of user-generated commerce. Not content, but commerce, where the customer comes first, we put it into an automated manufacturing model, the goods come out, and we put it into an omni-channel environment. Completely different, okay? So Richard Kelly basically postulates this, and I'll go through this quickly. He basically says, all things are products. All products will now be digitized. Digitized products become services, and services become fluid. So if that's true, what are products and what is service? What's happening with these exponential technologies is we're asking completely different questions of ourselves. So a great example that we're seeing right now is Stitch Fix. So what they do, they started in 2017. They have 3 million active clients. They're $1.2 billion in sales and one of the fastest growing apparel brands in the US because they use machine learning models to try to predict what you'll like when you get that box of 5 things so that you won't send those 5 things back. And they learn and learn and learn and learn. And once you get that box and you say, you gave me a cowboy hat and I don't like cowboy hats, they'll never send you a cowboy hat again. So it's becoming a really successful model that they're disrupting the traditional apparel and that consumer, that push model that Richard Kelly talked about, that they're disrupting it through the use of machine learning and algorithms. What's super interesting is that they just bought another company. A new tech startup in the apparel space just bought another tech startup in the apparel space last week. And they bought a company called Finery. And what Finery does is they scan receipts and they create a virtual wardrobe that lives in your phone and that you can start to wardrobe, and then you can start to have a conversation with your brand. It's getting a little bit cold out, this goes better with that, it's Christmas, time for the plaid sweater, and those kinds of things can start to happen when you're having a relationship with your end consumer on the phone. Another example that we're starting to see that's really been data-driven is a wearable company called Whoop. I don't know, has anyone heard of Whoop? They're a new startup and they have a very basic device. It's a wearable device and there's great optical scanning and galvanic skin response sensors on the device itself. But what's super interesting is not that they have a great technology where they can get all these data points, it's their app. And their data point can tell you when you need to sleep, what you need to do, and give you very specific guidelines of how to get into shape and how to stay in shape. And what's interesting is you get the device for free, but you pay $30 a month. So this idea of software as service is starting to really roll into our area. In the US, rental is also going to be driven by totally new models. The idea that product will now be transformed from a rental model that you can go to Urban Outfitters and you get 6 items for $88 a month is starting to be very, very disruptive from that traditional make and sell model. And Peloton is a great example too. Peloton just raised $550 million and they said they're a media company akin to Netflix. Now their original model was we're going to sell $2,000 bikes. That's actually not the model. The model is they're selling subscriptions to the best fitness classes that you can ever imagine taking. And on the supply chain side, we're seeing data reshaping commerce and markets with this idea of hyper-local, supermassive mass customization. So if we can imagine a world where an end consumer can say what they would like to buy, they input it into their iPad or data set, it's designed digitally, it's put into a matrix, and then made from automated manufacturing, then we're getting to this idea that we could start to make things on a one-to-one basis. Now, in the apparel industry, that's really difficult because we're making soft things. But if you look at this, Body Labs, recently acquired by Amazon, doing really accurate point-to-point detection with a 3-axis camera that was just released last week with the iPhone 11, rolling that into Electra or a Centric or a Gerber PLM system and making it at Carbon 3D or making it software in the US, all of a sudden, this seemed space-aged a year ago to talk about this. Now, it's actually really rational, and many companies are on this path. One of the things that I want to show you real quick, and I'm almost wrapped up because I know I'm the last thing between you guys and lunch, is this idea of what's happening on the personalization and customization side. So, and I do believe I have a video for this. Vera, you can help me with this on the next slide. MIT's computer lab has basically a photochromeleon or photovoltaic ink where they put every color ink into it, and when it's hit with a black light, it'll permanently change the color till you hit it with a black light again. So that means that you're getting multiple colors off of one pass, and everything is customizable with the flash of a light bulb. Let's see if we can get that video. It's just about a minute. So admittedly, while that's not an exponential technology, I thought that it was pretty cool. And then, yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about what's happening on the 3D manufacturing side. A great example of pulling that all together is a shout out to the folks here at Adidas for their Futurecraft, which I think is a really tremendous collaboration. And then here's just a quick video on how this works. Driven by Carbon 3D in the Bay Area. It's absolutely magic.
It's about people.
An evolution of creative freedom.
Things so complex, it feels like it should be impossible in the moment.
This is the next natural step.
Beta, we're never complete.
Wildly kind of complex.
Well, what's the idea?
Involving the human athlete.
Convergence of
design and manufacturing,
hardware engineering, software.
A workflow where things are seamless.
Programmable liquid resin
rises up.
It's a lattice, it's a matrix. Light and oxygen and bath of magic material.
Remove the bounds of the mold.
The future is now.
There's no beginning or end.
You're limitless.
What's amazing about Carbon 3D is actually their business model. And their business model is that they don't sell you the machine. They lease the software. And so that's allowed Adidas to be one of the first companies in the world to bring 3D printing into mass commercialization in the mass market. Previously, it's just been a sampling technology. So really, really amazing technology that's being driven by them. So again, you could put this in this disruption matrix where you could say, you determine a driver, what can change, 3D printing at scale. You determine what the megatrend is, new performance and comfort capabilities, because it is actually ridiculously comfortable. And then you can decide what should change. And all of a sudden, you become a disruptor in your industry. So I'm going to wrap it up. Essentially, what I want you guys to take away is this. Exponential technology, you're creating previously unimaginable innovations at alarming rates. These technologies are fueled by data and the means to transfer this data in real time. That's transformational. This is data inflection point is changing consumer expectations, shopping behaviors, markets, and commerce. And companies that embrace this disruption will future-proof their brands and will evolve. So, look, thanks for the time. And I do want to remind everybody of this. It's really about moving from predictive to prescriptive. And that's what's really going to make innovation drive ideas into your enterprise. So thanks very much. Appreciate it.